Advancements in ecosystem science are a vital part of marine management, helping to maintain sustainable fisheries and preserve threatened habitats. These days, there are many methods out there to quantify them. An end-to-end ecosystem model will consider all trophic levels present in the ecosystem, as well as abiotic factors to build up an exhaustive model of the system addressing how energy enters and exits. The author of this particular model, representing the Canadian Beaufort Shelf, found that trophic levels calculated using Ecopath and Ecosim were more accurate when groups had similar trophic connections and well-known diets. Less accuracy was found when the group was more taxonomically diverse and had more migratory species within it. With this in mind, the next 8 minutes will cover how Ecopath with Ecosim is used to quantify ecosystems, demonstrate how it was done in terms of Smith's Lake, and explore how the flow of carbon differs in other ecosystems. Beginning with an overview of the abiotic factors of Smith's Lake, the estuary is heavily regulated by an intermittent cycle of being opened to the ocean from the southern dunes, then closed off from the ocean. Biomass over time of predatory fish and fishery species in particular differs to those in water column or free-flowing river systems, as new fish can only recruit to replenish the local fishery when the lake is open. The Oceans to Estuarine Ecosystems Course historical dataset begins in 2013, and the lake was open at these times within that period. The lake is usually opened manually by the local council every 1.5 years or so, when the water level nears 2.1 meters above sea level. This is so the beach and nearby establishments don't flood. Similar to a dam breaking, the water rapidly leaving the estuary causes strong currents for a few days, and the dunes on Sandbar Beach naturally reform over the 6 to 12 months it takes for the lake to close again via wind and tidal action. You may be thinking something fishy is going on here with the frequent lake openings in 2021. Well, the lake doesn't only open when the council intervenes. Instead, an extreme rainfall event caused rapid sea level rise and triggered an opening. The effects of these abiotic factors on the biota are demonstrated in the biomass time series. However, the accuracy of some data points is tentative due to sampling errors and changing methods over the years. Okay, back to Ecopath. This is the master equation used, arranged so the left-hand side quantifies production and the right-hand side quantifies consumption. It represents conceptually that a balanced ecosystem will have a sufficient amount of prey biomass to support the predator populations. The primary aspect of this equation calculated at Smith's Lake was biomass, whilst other factors were extrapolated from external sources. The most important consideration prior to creating an Ecopath model is the trophic relationships between all of the species present. Then we can establish who's predated on and who predates. 15 ecotrophic groups are categorized at Smith's Lake. We start off with the primary producers, which form the first and lowest trophic level, since they predate on nothing. Zooplankton, epifauna, and herbivorous fish form trophic level 2 since they only predate on autotrophs and marine flora. Zoobenthos, jellyfish, small fish, and benthic crustaceans lie between trophic levels 2 and 3. Cephalopods, large fish, seabirds, and benthic fish all lie between trophic levels 3 and 4. A diet matrix is used to estimate the trophic levels of each group, and it is essential to consider these complex predator-prey dynamics as we explore the Ecopath data to understand why fluctuations in biomass occur and extrapolate relationships between ecotrophic groups. Returning to the Ecopath equation with these relationships in mind, the first parameter represents the biomass of the assessed prey group. In general, biomass in grams per meter squared was calculated by dividing the abundance of each ecotrophic group surveyed by the area of the lake it was sampled across. The production to biomass ratio demonstrates a trophic group's turnover rate. A value of 1 indicates that a population completely replaces its biomass in the span of a year. Phytoplankton has by far the highest turnover rate of 150 to 1 as they rapidly reproduce, are fast-growing and short-lived. Phytoplankton biomass this year was relatively high, which correlated with elevated levels of nitrates and phosphates found using the YSI probes around the UNSW field station septic tanks, leading the lake to look more like this, with very low visibility. Higher trophic levels are more likely to have a P/B ratio below 1 as they live longer and are slow-growing. Bream typically take 2 to 3 years to reach breeding maturity, which is reflected in the estimated P/B ratio. The third Ecopath parameter, ecotrophic efficiency, estimates how much energy is kept in the system by calculating the proportion of factors like predation mortality, fisheries catch, net migration, and biomass of an ecotrophic group over the total production. This gives a value between 0 and 1, where 1 is energy retained and 0 is energy lost. Seabirds will have close to 0 ecotrophic efficiency as they are not predated on, not harvested for consumption, migrate and forage in other additional locations, and have a low total biomass. In comparison, large fish are predated on by seabirds, take up a large portion of the fishery, remain within the lake, and have around 10 times the biomass of seabirds in 2025. Therefore, they had an ecotrophic efficiency of around 1.8. Now on to consumption. L is a constant we use to simplify our Ecopath model. The fourth parameter is the sum of all predator biomass. So when quantifying macroalgae as a prey group, we would add the biomass of the herbivorous fish, zoobenthos, and epifauna measured in the 2025 data. The consumption to biomass ratio represents the amount of food a predator group consumes in relation to its total biomass. This is a difficult parameter to gauge and is generally taken from published values or empirical equations. Fish consumption is often quantified with factors like mortality, body weight, temperature, and tail aspect ratio. The last Ecopath parameter is diet composition, which quantifies how much a predator's consumption is made up of a certain prey group. This concept underpins our earlier diet matrix used to predict trophic levels, and is given by a value of 0 to 1. For example, benthic fish which have no predators primarily consume benthic crustaceans and zoobenthos. However, small portions of their diet consists of small fish and cephalopods. Deep-sea ecosystems have also been quantified using Ecopath with EcoSim. One study modeled the trophic dynamics between deep-sea ecosystems with and without methane seeps at 1,000 to 2,000 meters below the South China Sea. Despite the lack of sunlight, a large portion of the first trophic level likely consists of photosynthetic organisms in the form of marine snow. This carbon input from the surface can sequester in the deep ocean for thousands of years. In ecosystems measured away from the methane seeps, species richness was much lower, and predators were limited by the inconsistent primary food supply. At the seeps, the presence of chemosynthetic bacteria, which utilizes the methane and other hydrocarbons as nutrient input, supports larger and more diverse groups with lower consumer levels. This continues in a bottom-up trophic cascade, allowing higher trophic level predators like king crabs and spider crabs to establish and thrive. Since these methane seeps can be several hundreds of meters wide, it's possible to quantify the distinct ecosystem with Ecopath. However, it gets difficult in ecosystems with less range, like those around hydrothermal vents which have similar inputs, and artificial reefs, as transient species are highly abundant. Here are my references. Thank you.